Have you ever walked into a room or a meeting and immediately felt the vibe was off? Or are you that person at work who just had a feeling about things, who notices things aren't going the way everyone else thinks they are? Hi, I'm Brett the Audi Boss, and on this channel we talk about ADHD and autism in the workplace. I have over 12 years of leadership training and experience and a formal diagnosis of autism and ADHD. For years, I had a hard time naming what those insights were. I remember talking to a newly promoted general manager about this, and they told me I had specific insights that others didn't tend to bring in, that I could pick up on things that other people just simply weren't seeing or noticing. That's part of how I became a trusted advisor to more senior leaders. But I struggled for years to quantify that, to name it, to actually say what that thing was. It wasn't until I better understood my AuDHD, my autism and ADHD, that I could finally understand what it was. A combination of how my brain notices things, how I react to situations, and how my nervous system was shifting and moving in the various situations that I would find myself in, even when I didn't have the specific words to name that context. Naming that process took me years to figure out. It wasn't until I read the work of Dr. Ludmila Praslova, who explains that neurodivergent employees are sort of the modern day canary in the coal mine for how we are in corporate America, where we might see and feel things before others do. Dr. Praslova is an organizational psychologist and professor at Vanguard University, where she founded the graduate program of industrial organizational psychology. She has spent more than 25 years on this work, and organizations like Amazon, MIT, Bank of America have all worked with her on neuro-inclusion training. In 2025, she won the Thinkers50 Talent Award. She's also the first person to publish with an autistic perspective in the Harvard Business Review. In her book, The Canary Code, she takes the canary in the coal mine metaphor and puts a modern perspective on it through neurodivergent employees. Today's canary is the employee who notices the toxic workplace first. We might notice the broken workflows, that toxic culture, the ethical drift, often well before anyone else does. And a lot of organizations don't always respond positively to this, signaling that sometimes those of us who speak up can be the problem. The book lays out 6 principles idea of the Canary Code, which redesigns work so that neurodivergent employees don't burn out, and so the systems get better for everyone in the workplace. We started out our conversation by talking about the history of the canary in the coal mine.
It's imagery that I think many people know, and they say, oh, I feel like a canary in coal mine, but many people don't realize that it's not just an expression, that there were actual birds in coal mines, and they are considered one of the sentinel species, specifically in situations that require more intense air metabolism. Because if you have more intense air metabolism, which it means you will react faster to airborne toxins. And so people would definitely visibly see that canary is not doing well. And that means that after a while, humans start not feeling well. And there's one misconception that they were just taken in as, sacrificial animals and died. That's not true. They were actually treated as employees. And so in the UK, mines were employing canaries, and 2 canaries, that was a requirement. And they did monitor them. So whenever they would see signs of distress, they would take them out, and then they would get people out, and they had canary resuscitation devices where they could give them oxygen.
Oh, wow.
So not the most desirable job in the world. But that's a misconception that it was just like, senseless cruelty, because humans are also not senselessly cruel. They just, sometimes they get their wires crossed, but that was not a purpose of it, to just have like canaries die. They were treated as well as they could under the circumstances.
And you write that, in modern times, really a lot of us, those of us who are neurodivergent, we tend to be those modern day canaries because we tend to notice the symptoms of a toxic workplace, and then we feel it a little bit more frequently or more faster than others.
And that's pretty much the exact parallel, because we do know that at least for autistic people, there are very clear findings that autistic brain processes more information per time unit, significantly more. And so we have more intense psychological metabolism. And if there are, psychological issues that can stress and strain other people, then if you have more intense nervous system that is working over time, that you are going to be impacted first.
I love how you write about that. You write that the lack of fairness in toxic culture impacts those of us with more intense senses and nervous systems, and that sensitive, this was my favorite line in the whole book, sensitive does not mean broken. And I just felt that was such an important thing to state in the book. I just found that very helpful.
Thank you. Well, Canary is not broken.
Yeah.
The canary has intense air metabolism by design, because that's what allows a bird to function, to fly, to sing, and to do what it is meant to do.
Yeah.
So we have some humans who have more intense psychological wiring, because human society needs some people who function this way. And we need different types of people to maximize our collective benefit. It's just our society has decided that certain traits that actually benefit us collectively are, laughable or undesirable or punishable in individual humans, without thinking that actually those characteristics are valuable.
And so from that, you have designed in the book what you're calling the Canary Code, which is based off of 6 main principles. I wonder if you could talk through some of those principles.
Right. I start with participation, because you need to know what people need. We don't wear it on our foreheads of what it is exactly that we need. So we need to ask people, and that is going to get rid of so many problems that just stem from assumptions and not asking people directly. And then participation increases motivation, increases productivity, is just good anyway. And then why are we organizing work based on all kinds of intermediate things, like how much do you smile, or what do you wear, or all those other performative things, if we can just look at outcomes? So if we start looking at work based on outcomes, hiring based on outcomes, promoting based on outcomes, it's going to eliminate also a lot of unnecessary stress. And then we'll be able to hire and treasure people who work in different ways, maybe different from us, but they achieve good outcomes. And that allows flexibility, because why would you monitor how someone works if you're looking for their outcomes? Give them flexibility in everything else. And that, again, helps neurodivergent people, but it literally helps everyone. Yeah. It helps caretakers, it helps anyone. Organizational justice, mechanisms for organizational justice, structural justice. Again, not just telling you managers be good, because, again, that's a huge cognitive load. But creating organizational environments where there are checks and balances, or where decisions are checked, where there are ombuds offices, because, mistakes happen and we need to work through them. All those things are increasing the likelihood of just outcomes, even given all those human imperfections. But that's why we need to build just systems around ourselves, because relying on our justice, even with our best intentions, is an iffy proposition. Transparency, because people need to know what's going on.
That's
and it's very easy, in dark places for things to grow. So we want clarity, not just because it helps neurodivergent people to know what's expected and grow in the workplace and not try to figure out the hidden game. It helps first generation college graduates. It helps all kinds of people who just don't have the time or energy or a generational capital to be figuring out all the non-transparent aspects of organizational work. So, and then just valid instruments for decision-making, because if we don't have good tools for selection or for performance management, for determining who gets into leadership pipelines, then again, we're just perpetuating our dysfunction.
Yeah. As I read the book, I'm sitting here cheering you on because I love everything about how you've set this in motion, how you've organized it, how you've broken it down into all these different categories. How do we put this into practice? What does this look like as we sort of move into sort of a more holistic belonging for neurodivergent employees?
Definitely not the easiest thing to do. And things like holistic belonging can really sound lofty. But if you just start in platinum rule, that rather than golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, treat others how they would like to be treated. So participation is right there. So we understand that we're all different, and we're different in more than one way. We're different in how our bodies are function, which is why I have this sensory physical aspect. If you understand that even though you are not bothered by an open office, other people truly are, and they're not making it up. And if you put, if you measure their skin-based stress response, physiological stress response, if you measure their heart rate, they are extremely stressed by those open offices. Then you might design your environment differently. You will appreciate sensory differences. You will have, library areas versus teamwork areas that are separate. And that's one area when our bodies are able to function in a way that doesn't constantly startle us.
Yeah.
It just makes much more sense to give it to people so that they could function. And that emotional inclusion, because we also process emotion differently. And then workplaces are trying to put everyone into this super narrow range of this expected positive effect, but not too happy because why are you too happy? And don't you dare cry because that's just the end of your career.
Yeah.
Why can't we just be more human?
Yeah. Just be ourselves.
Yeah. And just appreciate that there are emotional differences and we wear our emotion differently. And then obviously cognitive differences, we talk about them, but there are, again, other ones, emotional and physical, but cognitive differences are real and important. And why do we want to slice everyone's time into 25-minute segments if some people can only work productively in 3 to 4 hour chunks?
Yeah.
Give people those chunks, and if somebody needs to slice them, they can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and this is the question that I kept coming back to as I read the book. I mean, you hit on some of my favorite leadership, thinking in terms of focusing on strength-based approaches, which I think is just so simple to do, but removing barriers for people. You mentioned it a minute ago, the necessity for transparency, and you connected this amazing dot of transparency means more engagement. We have so many organizations that measure employee engagement and employee satisfaction every year. Transparency means engagement, and through that clear communication. Why have these core values just seem so simple? Why don't we see more of it in the workplace?
Oh my gosh, that's $1 million question. And there are multiple things. Sometimes it's inertia and tradition. Something has been done in a certain way for a very long time. And then we attach label of professionalism to whatever's been done for a million centuries. And we just keep doing it. And people say that autistic people are not comfortable with change. Nobody's comfortable with change. And we always talk about change and disruption, but people only want to disrupt certain things. They don't want to, change how they relate to others and so forth. It's actually a lot of work. And so one thing is just habit inertia. In older organizations, there are, traditions and pages and pages of manuals of how things have always been done. People are scared of change.
Yeah.
People are scared of change, especially if you are on top. And what happens if something moves? What if you slide down? We don't incentivize creativity. We say we do, but we really incentivize towing the line, being obedient, and so forth. Yeah. And we also look at things like ROI, and we're afraid, what if we'll do something new? Would it make it worse?
Yeah.
And even if it's shown that for other people it worked as something better, it just feels like either too risky or not a priority.
I can hear the corporate conversations that I had over my career where it was basically just that exactly. It was too risky or it wasn't enough. What's the ROI? And too much creativity, depending on the higher leadership, tends to scare them almost a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. Which is so counter to what everyone wants. Yes. Give us innovation.
Yes. But the kind of innovation we want in this tiny little box, which, blows my mind because it sounds so rigid to me as an autistic person. And I think, come on, let's work on that. But yeah.
If you hire people with various kinds of talents, your organization is going to have more richness in that area, not how human thriving works. So as long as we are saying, okay, so those people are allowed to thrive and those people are not, we are not creating a thriving society. That's a complete illusion. And we also need to stop thinking about it competitively. So that's one thing with also this traditional thinking that it's either or, some people benefit, some people don't. It shouldn't be competitive because we really are in this together and we do need all the different talents. And I appreciate neurodivergent talents and what they're good at. And we all have people in our lives who are of all the different neurotypes.
Yeah.
And we do know that, in family or friends group or any other collectivity, if one person is not thriving, it's very hard for everyone else to thrive. So it's the same logic.
Yeah, we thrive together or not at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. You write a great section in the book about some of the derailers to the inclusion work. What are some of those I think you sort of noted a couple there, but what are some derailers we need to be aware of?
Relying too much on one person to drive it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's very risky in organizations. You lose that person, you
tend to burn that person out. Yeah.
And so zero-sum games, that we just need to work singularly on this one group. Others, we just don't have the energy for it. That's actually not how it works. You do create better environments. You do improve environments for everyone. But otherwise, you're going to end up with derailers like the diversity fatigue and change fatigue because you keep trying. But if you're only trying to benefit, let's say 8% or 12% of people, even if it just looks like that to other people, it's just not going to work. Do something like create transparent guidelines for promotion that everyone except for maybe like the most Machiavellian person in your organization is going to love. And you're going to get much more solid base for support for other steps. Because again, we're not asking for, anything unreasonable.
Yeah.
Give us more flexibility.
Yeah.
Don't stick us into hot desking and stress us out for no good reason.
Yeah.
And who in their sound mind doesn't want that?
Yeah. Well, and you note too in the book that the necessity to just bring us to the table on those conversations. Don't do it around us, but just include us in that conversation. That's really not too much to ask.
It's not too much to ask. And really, it just benefits everyone. So it just seems like such a common sense.
It does, yes.
To create environments that work from the margin rather than say, okay, so those people belong and everybody else we don't care about. It just makes so much more sense to build from the margin and then everyone is taken care of.
Those of us who tend to get sort of trapped in those narratives at work where, we are working hard, we think we're working hard, but we're not being performative enough for the workplace. How can we sort of better navigate manager assumptions that sometimes get built around us without our control?
That is a very hard thing. So ideally, we do need systemic change because individual level solutions can only go so far when we're trying to address a systemic problem. And managers not understanding neurodiversity is more of a systemic problem. So there are individual things, and people people advocate for self-advocacy, which again is exhausting and in many cases punishable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so trying to create as advocacy, and it's completely unfair and it's infuriating because neurodivergent people, based on the power existing in society, have to translate themselves and explain themselves and make themselves palatable. Another expression I really don't like. I also don't like the phrase managing up. So I'm running out of options for how to explain myself, because I also feel like it's imposing extra work on those with the least power and the least ability to do this extra work. So in a fair environment, it should be on the organization, not on the person. Now, if we are stuck as that person, so first of all, we've been probably told a million times that it's your fault, you're not presenting yourself well enough. So one thing to understand that this is hard. And if you're not neurotypical, then presenting as neurotypical is another job.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, this is a whole other job on top of the job. This is ridiculously unfair. And then sometimes just say, okay, so how do I do it without killing myself? If I'm stuck in this place, if I can't leave, even though I would look at options, but if this is an organization where I want to grow, then how do I do it without burning myself out? Because that's what usually happens. You advocate until you burn out. I would say find allies who will show you maybe some ways in which they work through this. Like who are not autistic, for example. Yeah. And also determine what really matters to you. Because sometimes we feel like so imperfect at everything that then we try to do everything. But there are some things particularly that matter to your manager, and there are things that matter to your organization. And I think we have enough pattern detection to know what those things are in our specific environments. And now we just need to, take a deep breath and just work through it and say, okay, I'm not going to change myself. I'm not going to do the things that I detest about organizational politics. But it's another thing to see our manager as a human with human limitations and imagine them in whatever inappropriate way you want to, that will remind you about the fact that they're humans. Yeah. And say, I'm just going to help this human figure out this thing. Yeah. Rather than, managing up, even though, again, it has multiple meanings for different people. Yeah. But you can, just with your honesty and with your ethics intact, suggest solutions for those things that actually matter, and get flexibility for what actually matters for you. Because if you'll say, I'm going to solve X, Y, Z, and here's my plan, and let me experiment by, working for 2 weeks or a month or whatever from home, and let me bring you the solution. Yeah. Most managers will be much more likely to say, okay, let's try it, than if you say, for blah, blah, blah reasons, I need to permanently work from home. That's a much harder sell. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or whatever it is. You want a different assignment. You want to say that you would really, really be good at that role, and you haven't been given an opportunity at this role. Yeah. Just ask about it for experiment. It's also good for you because, what if your expectations don't work out? Well, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Right. So that's one way to do it. Don't commit to, I'm going to, sell my soul to the devil and, kiss up for the rest of my life. Guys, that's just not a good psychological place. Yeah. Yeah, but that's phenomenal advice, because it's like, if you're having regular check-ins with your boss, if you can kind of just figure out what their priorities are and sort of get on that same wavelength, and then offer up solutions for how you can be helpful, and then through that get your needs met through trial and error, that's a really great approach to sort of navigating some of those more difficult waters. I like that a lot. That's really helpful. it's a respectful process that respects them as, someone who has free will and tries to accomplish the goal. But it also doesn't require you to forget who you are and just become completely apathetic and turn into the person you despise in the office.
Well, and that kind of segues into how you kind of wrap up the book, which is a part about how we need more neurodivergent leaders. We need more managers who are aware of the neurodivergence but you also note that there's a balance to that about how, and you sort of noted it earlier in our conversation about how the person who has to be the one pushing that tends to burn out faster. They carry all that weight in addition to the main job that they're trying to do.
That's why we need groups. That's why we need ERGs, informal allyship relationships. That's why we need to start with small work groups where we can, at least in our little group, create more flexible norms where we know that we're all different and being different is okay. And then we can just work from there.
Yeah. My thanks to Dr. Praslova for her time today. If you want the full framework and the 6 principles, the research and the practical playbook, go ahead and check out the Canary Code. I've got a link in the description below where you can find more information about it and Dr. Praslova. And as you can see, I did a lot of reading. Thanks as always for watching, and be sure to check out some of the other videos while you're here. And also be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so that you get more of this in your feed, and so it helps the algorithm find other people who can benefit from the conversations and the information that I'm sharing here. Please be sure to let me know if there's a topic or subject matter you'd like for me to cover. I'm pretty responsive in the comments, so just let me know in any of the comments and the videos below. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe.